I still remember the exact moment we made the pact. Not because it was dramatic or anything, but because it was so damn quiet. 1 second, we were just two drunk guys sitting on the fire escape behind that cramped apartment, and the next we looked at each other and said, "Let's never talk about this." Sounds mysterious, I know. But honestly, it wasn't about hiding anything scandalous or breaking some big taboo. It was just complicated. I guess that's the best way to put it, so here's the deal. My name's Alex, and I'm 27, living in this city that somehow feels both suffocating and full of possibilities at the same time. I work a boring 9 to 5 that pays the bills but doesn't light any fires under me. I'm your average guy who doesn't really have a big social circle, but I'm okay with that. I'm not the guy who goes out to clubs every weekend or has some endless stream of dates. I'm more of a grab a coffee and talk about dumb movies kind of guy. Enter Noah. He moved into the apartment next door about 6 months ago. And from day one, there was this weird vibe. Like, I don't know, he carried a little storm around with him, but also something warm and inviting. Tall, messy brown hair that always looked like he'd just run a hand through it in frustration, and these eyes that actually seemed to see through you. I wasn't sure if I was annoyed, intrigued, or something in between. We didn't talk much at first, just the usual hey in the hallway or awkward nods when we crossed paths. But then one night, after a random power outage in the building, we both ended up outside on the fire escape, lighting cigarettes and sharing silence. That's when things started to change. We didn't say much at first, mostly small talk about the blackout, the city noise, stupid stuff to fill the silence. But as the night stretched on, it felt like something unspoken was hanging in the air between us. I can't explain what it was exactly, but it was like the kind of tension you feel right before something important happens, but you don't know what it is yet. Neither of us said it, but I think we both sensed that this night wasn't going to be a typical neighborly chat. What happened after that was unexpected, messy, and honestly kind of beautiful in a way I still can't put into words. But here's the thing. We agreed not to talk about it afterward. Not out of shame or regret, but because some moments are better left as they are, raw, unfiltered, and just ours. So yeah, that's the setup. Just two guys, a fire escape, and a night that changed everything without a single word spoken about it ever again. And if you're wondering what actually went down that night, well, I guess you'll have to stick around for that. Because some stories start with silence, and some secrets are carved in the quiet between the noise. I remember that night like it was a slow-motion scene in a movie, where everything feels amplified, but the soundtrack is muted. We sat there, side by side on the fire escape, the city lights casting this orange glow on everything. The air was crisp, but not quite cold enough to make you shiver. It was one of those nights where the world feels paused, like nothing else mattered except the two of us in that moment. Noah pulled out a cigarette and offered me one. I hesitated for a second. Never been much of a smoker, but took it anyway, mostly because I didn't want to break whatever silent rhythm we had going. He lit his up and passed the lighter to me. I didn't really inhale, just held it between my fingers like I was pretending. "Why do you even smoke?" I asked, finally breaking the quiet. He shrugged, eyes fixed somewhere between the street and the sky. "Hell if I know. Probably just to not feel so quiet all the time." That hit me harder than I expected. Quiet. That was definitely us. Two quiet guys who barely said much, but somehow found each other in the middle of that silence. We talked a little more after that about random stuff. His job at some art gallery downtown, my endless spreadsheet hell at an insurance company. It was normal and mundane, but the way he said things made everything feel like it mattered more than it should. There was this honesty to him that felt rare. Then, I don't know what made us lean closer. Maybe it was the way the city noises faded, or how the darkness gave us a sense of privacy even though we were outside. My heart was pounding so loudly it felt like it was going to burst through my ribs. I was pretty sure his was too. And then, I just kissed him. Not because we planned it or agreed to it, but because it felt like the only thing left to do. His lips were warm, soft, and for a second the whole world stopped. When we finally pulled apart, neither of us said a word. We just sat there, side by side again, the tension between us thick but somehow comfortable. Maybe we shouldn't talk about this, Noah said finally, his voice low. I nodded before I even realized what I was agreeing to. Yeah, let's just keep it like this. Just us. No words needed. That was the pact. And for a while, it worked. We kept hanging out, mostly in silence or with small talk, like nothing had changed. But the way we looked at each other sometimes said more than words ever could. I felt like I was holding onto something fragile, like if I said the wrong thing, it would shatter. One night, a couple of weeks later, we ended up at the same fire escape again. This time, I was a little braver. I asked him why he moved here in the first place. He looked at me like I'd asked the dumbest question in the world. I needed a fresh start, somewhere I wouldn't have to explain myself. That hit closer to home than I wanted to admit. Explain yourself? I asked. He looked away, running a hand through his hair. Yeah, back where I'm from, things didn't go well after I came out. Lost a lot of people who were supposed to care. I felt my chest tighten. That please mess, I'm sorry. Yeah. He smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. But here, it's different. I don't have to pretend anymore. That night, I realized that Noah wasn't just a mysterious neighbor anymore. He was someone who'd been through his own kind of hell and was trying to find a way out. We sat there until the sun started creeping up, neither of us wanting to break the silence. But it wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It felt like a shared understanding. Still, we never talked about that night, the one on the fire escape when we kissed. We just let it exist, like a secret piece of art hanging between us, fragile and beautiful. But secrets have a way of catching up with you. A few days ago, I found myself standing outside his door, heart hammering like crazy. I wasn't sure why I was there, whether to say something, ask something, or just see if the moment was real. He opened the door, surprise flickering across his face. Hey, I said, voice shakier than I wanted. Hey, he replied, stepping aside to let me in. The apartment was just like I imagined, cluttered but cozy, with art supplies scattered and vinyl records stacked in the corner. We sat on his couch, the silence stretching again. Finally, I blurted out, "Do you ever think about that night?" He looked at me, eyes searching. Then he smiled a little, the kind that made me feel like, maybe, just maybe, we could break the pact without breaking everything. Sometimes, he said, and just like that, the walls I'd built around that night started to feel a little less solid. I don't know what comes next with Noah, but for the first time in a long time, I want to find out together. His smile was small, almost shy, but it felt genuine, like he was letting me in just a little bit more than before. I wanted to reach out and hold on to that, but old habits die hard, and I kept my distance, both physically and emotionally. I guess, I said slowly, I've been thinking about it too, more than I probably should. He laughed softly, the kind of laugh that's part amusement, part relief. You're not the only one. For a while, we just sat there in that comfortable silence, the kind that doesn't need to be filled with words. I noticed how the light from the street lamp outside hit his face just right, catching the curve of his cheek and the way his eyes crinkled at the corners. So, I finally said, breaking the quiet, what do we do now? We made a pact not to talk about it, but here we are. Noah shrugged, running a hand through his hair again. Maybe the pact was just a way to protect ourselves at the time, but maybe it's okay to let it go now. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think that this could be something more than a one-night thing we agreed to forget. But the walls I'd put up around my own feelings made me hesitate. Scared? I asked, half teasing, half serious. He looked at me, eyes searching mine like he wanted me to be honest. Yeah, he admitted, more than I want to admit. Me too, I said quietly. That confession felt like a crack in the dam holding everything back, and suddenly the space between us felt a little smaller. We ended up talking for hours about everything except that night, ironically. We shared stories about our childhoods, our families, dreams we'd given up on, and the weird ways the city had shaped us. It was one of those rare moments where you feel like you're peeling back layers, even if you're careful not to reveal too much. At some point, the conversation died down and we just sat there, caught in the quiet that felt less like a barrier and more like a bond. I glanced at my phone, realized it was nearly 3 a.m., and sighed. I probably should get going. Early meeting tomorrow? Noah nodded, standing up to walk me to the door. As I reached for the handle, he stopped me. Alex, he said softly, thank you for coming over. It means a lot. Yeah, I replied. Me too. Before I could second-guess myself, I reached out and grabbed his hand. His fingers twined with mine naturally, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. We stood there like that for a moment, and I could feel my heart racing. Maybe we don't have to keep the pact anymore, I whispered. He smiled, squeezing my hand gently. Maybe not. That night marked the start of something new, even if neither of us said it out loud. After that, we started hanging out more often. Not just in passing or awkward chats in the hallway, but real conversations, shared meals, and quiet nights watching terrible movies. Noah had this way of making the small stuff feel special, like it wasn't just filler between bigger things. One night, a couple of weeks after that first real talk, we found ourselves back on the fire escape. The city was quieter than usual, the hum of distant traffic softened by the late hour. We sat close, sharing a blanket he'd grabbed from inside. Remember when we made that pact? I asked, a little smile tugging at my lips. He laughed. Yeah, feels like a lifetime ago. I'm glad we broke it, I said honestly. Me too, he said, looking up at the stars. Funny how one night can change everything. I nodded, heart full but nerves jangling. Do you think this, us, could be something real? He turned to me, eyes steady and sure. I want it to be. That was all I needed to hear. Of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were moments when the past crept in, the fears, the doubts, the unspoken things we still held close. But each time, we faced them together, slowly building something that felt like more than just a secret or a pact. Now, when I think back to that night on the fire escape, I don't see just silence or restraint. I see the beginning of something messy, imperfect, and real. Something worth breaking pacts for. After that night, things between us started to shift in ways I hadn't dared to imagine before. It was like we were filling in the blank spaces we'd both been avoiding for so long. The pact we'd made not to talk about what happened wasn't just a rule anymore. It was a boundary that needed breaking if we wanted to move forward. I remember the first time I stayed over at Noah's place. It wasn't planned. We'd been out late grabbing coffee. Well, him coffee, me a black tea because caffeine at night is my worst decision. And when I glanced at the clock, it was nearly 1 a.m. The last train home was long gone. I was about to make some awkward excuse and leave when Noah just shrugged and said, "You can crash here if you want." That casual invitation felt like a door opening. His apartment was even cozier inside than I'd thought, walls covered with framed photos and canvases half finished. Music hummed quietly from the speakers as he led me to his couch and tossed me a blanket. I was nervous, of course, but there was something about being in his space that felt safe. We didn't do much, just sat there wrapped in silence, watching a dumb sci-fi flick neither of us really cared about. At some point, my head found its way onto his shoulder, and he didn't move away. Instead, he tightened his arm around me just a little. I had this sudden, overwhelming thought that maybe this was what I'd been waiting for, even if I hadn't known it. Not fireworks or grand declarations, but quiet moments like this, where two people just existed together. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of strong coffee and the soft click of the window blinds being pulled back. Noah was already up, standing by the kitchen counter, looking out at the city waking up. He looked different in the daylight, more relaxed, less guarded. "Morning," he said without turning around. "Morning," I replied, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. He handed me a mug and sat down beside me on the couch. For a moment, we just sipped our drinks, letting the silence stretch again. But this time, it didn't feel empty. "So," I said, "you hiding from anyone special this morning?" He laughed, the sound warm and real. "Nope, just me and my broken record collection." I smiled, feeling a little braver. "You know, I'm glad we broke that pact." He turned to me, eyes serious. "Me too. I think I was scared of what would happen if we didn't." "Scared of what?" I asked. of losing the moment, or ruining the friendship, of things getting messy. I nodded, understanding all too well. But now, that fear felt like something we could face together. Our days started to blend into one another in the best way. Lazy Sunday mornings, shared dinners where we cooked too much and ate too little, long walks through the park where we talked about everything and nothing. And yeah, sometimes we fell back into silence, but it was different now. Comfortable, not tense. One evening, a couple of weeks later, we found ourselves back on the fire escape, the place where it all started. The city lights flickered below us, the noise a dull hum that somehow felt distant. "I've been thinking," Noah said suddenly, breaking the quiet. "Dangerous," I teased. He laughed. "Maybe. But seriously, I wonder how we ended up here. Not just on this fire escape, but here. Together." I looked at him, the way the glow of the street lamp softened his features. "I don't know. I guess sometimes you just find someone who makes the noise quieter." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, you're that for me." The words hit my chest like a weight and a relief all at once. "I want you to know," he continued, "I'm not great at this, at being open or saying the right things. But I want to try with you." My heart was pounding. I reached out, fingers brushing against his hand. "I want that too." For the first time in a long time, I let myself believe that maybe this wasn't just a fling or a secret. Maybe it was something real. Messy and imperfect, sure, but real. Over the next few weeks, we started to introduce each other to the little corners of our lives. Noah took me to that tiny art gallery where he worked, showing me the paintings and sculptures that inspired him. I showed him my favorite coffee spot, the one with the terrible music but the best pastries in town. It wasn't perfect. There were moments when I felt like I was walking on eggshells, afraid to say or do the wrong thing. And there were times when Noah would get quiet, pulling back just enough to remind me that he was still carrying his own scars. But every time, we found our way back to each other. One night, after a dinner that ended with us laughing until our sides hurt, we ended up tangled together on his couch. The city's glow seeped through the windows, bathing us in soft light. "I don't regret breaking the pact," I whispered, tracing circles on his arm. "Neither do I," he said, voice low. And in that moment, surrounded by the hum and heartbeat of the city, I realized that some pacts aren't meant to last forever. Sometimes, breaking them is the start of something worth holding on to. A few weeks after that night on his couch, I found myself standing outside Noah's door again, but this time with a different kind of nervousness. It wasn't about whether I should be there or not. I was already in, but about what came next. We'd settled into this rhythm of figuring each other out, but I could feel there were still things left unsaid, walls neither of us wanted to knock down just yet. He opened the door before I even could knock, looking a little surprised but smiling. Hey yourself," I said, stepping inside. His apartment looked the same, cozy chaos woven into every corner, but tonight it felt different, like a stage set for something new. We sat at his small kitchen table, the worn wood scratched and stained from years of use. Noah poured us both glasses of wine, the red liquid catching the light in a way that made the whole moment feel a little cinematic. He was quiet, watching me like he was waiting for me to say something. I took a breath. "How are you really? Like, not just the casual, 'I'm fine,' but the real answer." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Surprised you're still here, actually. I guess. I worry I'm not the easiest person to be around." I laughed softly. "You're definitely a puzzle. But I like puzzles." "Good," he said, leaning back in his chair, "because I think I'm about to confuse you even more." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. He hesitated for a moment, then said, "There are parts of me I don't talk about. Things I've kept locked away because they hurt too much or because I didn't want anyone to see." I nodded slowly, not pushing him, but letting the space be open. "Like that night," he added. "It wasn't just a random thing. It meant something. More than I was ready to admit back then." I reached across the table, my fingers brushing his. "It means something to me too." His eyes met mine, and I could see that flicker, the one that says, "I want to trust you, but I'm scared." "Can I tell you something?" he asked quietly. Of course. Noah took a deep breath. Before I moved here, I was in a relationship. It wasn't good. We fought a lot, and I felt trapped, like I was losing myself. I ended it, but it left me broken, I guess. The admission made my chest tighten. I'm sorry you had to go through that. It's part of why I made that pact with you, the one about not talking. I was afraid if I let myself feel too much, I'd get hurt again, so I tried to keep things light, keep things simple. But it wasn't simple, was it? I asked. No, he admitted. Not with you. We sat there, fingers still intertwined, the silence filled with things neither of us could say out loud. Finally, I whispered, I don't want simple. I want real. Noah smiled then, a genuine smile that made my heart ache. Me too. That night, something shifted between us. The walls we'd both built started to crumble, brick by brick. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, moments when the past threatened to pull us under, but we kept choosing each other. One rainy afternoon, we found ourselves holed up in his apartment, the storm thrumming against the windows. We'd planned to go out, but the weather had other ideas. Guess we're stuck here, Noah said, tossing me a blanket. Could be worse, I replied, pulling it around my shoulders. We ended up sprawled on the floor, surrounded by half-empty takeout containers and stacks of vinyl records. Noah put on some old jazz, the kind that makes you feel like you're in a smoky club somewhere far away. As the music played, I watched him, the way his eyes closed when the saxophone hit a high note, the way his fingers tapped the rhythm on the floor. Without thinking, I reached out and brushed a lock of hair from his forehead. He opened his eyes and caught my hand, holding it gently. I don't want to hide anymore, he said softly. You don't have to, I replied. And in that moment, the pact was buried beneath layers of laughter, tears, and quiet confessions. We didn't need to talk about that night anymore, not because it was forgotten, but because it had become the foundation of something real, something we were both willing to risk, even when it scared us. Looking back, I realized that sometimes the most important promises aren't the ones you make out loud. Sometimes they're the ones you break, because holding onto a secret can be heavier than letting it go. Noah and I, we're still figuring it out. The city still hums around us, full of noise and chaos. But now, there's something steady in the middle of it all, something that feels like home. There's this weird moment in every new relationship where you start to wonder if the other person really knows you, or at least the parts you don't tell just anyone. With Noah, that moment hit me one afternoon when we were sitting in my tiny apartment, the sunlight filtering through the blinds like lazy stripes on the floor. We'd been together a few months by then, but we still hadn't talked about a lot of the messy stuff lurking beneath the surface. I liked that about us. The slow reveal, like peeling an orange instead of ripping off the whole peel at once. But sometimes it made me nervous, like there were still walls standing between us, waiting to be knocked down or climbed over. Noah was perched on the edge of my couch, scrolling through his phone, and I was on the floor, half distracted by a crossword puzzle I was trying to finish. The silence between us felt comfortable until it wasn't. You ever feel like you're still carrying ghosts? I asked out of nowhere. He looked up, eyebrows raised, like I'd caught him in the middle of a secret. Ghosts? He echoed. Yeah. Like things from your past that don't haunt you exactly, but they don't quite let you move on either. For a second, he just stared at me, then shrugged. All the time. But I guess it's about how you deal with them. You can let them drag you down or try to learn from them. I nodded, biting the inside of my cheek. I guess I'm still figuring out which way works better. Noah's eyes softened. I'm here if you want to talk about it. There it was. The invitation. Gentle, but real. I hesitated, glancing down at the puzzle, like if I looked hard enough, I'd find the words I needed. So I told him about the way I'd grown up with this constant pressure to be the perfect kid, the one who never messed up, never caused trouble. About the nights I'd lie awake, wondering if I'd ever be enough, not just for my parents, but for myself. About the fear I'd had, deep down, that loving someone like Noah might make things even more complicated. He listened without interrupting, his eyes steady and kind. When I finished, he reached out and took my hand. Thank you for trusting me with that, he said. I know it's not easy. It's not, I admitted. but it feels good to say it. Noah smiled, squeezing my hand. I've got my own ghosts, too. Maybe one day I'll tell you about them. I like the sound of that. A future where we shared the weight, instead of carrying it alone. Later that evening, we decided to take a walk. The city was settling into its nighttime rhythm, neon signs flickering on, the distant hum of traffic mixing with the occasional laughter from nearby bars. We strolled through the streets, side by side, the kind of easy silence that felt like a conversation all its own. You know, Noah said, breaking the quiet. There's a park just a few blocks from here. It's kind of hidden, but at night, it's like a secret escape from all the noise. I raised an eyebrow. Lead the way. He grinned, looping his arm through mine as we turned down a narrow street. The park was small but beautiful. Trees arching overhead, leaves whispering in the breeze, and a bench tucked away beneath a lamppost. We sat down, the cool air wrapping around us like a blanket. Sometimes, Noah said, I come here when I need to think. When the city feels too loud or my head feels too full. I nodded, understanding completely. We talked less that night, but I remember feeling like we were saying everything in the way our shoulders touched or the way our fingers found each other's in the dark. A few days later, things took a turn I hadn't quite expected. Noah invited me over for dinner, not takeout or anything casual, but an actual meal he'd cooked himself. I was impressed to find he wasn't just good at art and music, but surprisingly talented in the kitchen, too. We ate by candlelight, the soft glow highlighting the way his eyes lit up when he talked about his latest gallery project. After dinner, we sank onto the couch, the silence comfortable but charged. Then, out of nowhere, he reached for my hand and said, I want to meet your friends. My stomach flipped. I'd never told many people about us, not because I was ashamed, but because I wasn't ready for the questions, the judgments, or the awkwardness that often came with coming out again and again. Really? I asked. Surprised, but hopeful. Yeah, I want to be part of your world, Alex. Not just the quiet nights and stolen moments, but everything. The idea was terrifying and thrilling all at once. I'd like that, I said softly. That night, as I walked home under the city's glow, I realized how far we'd come, from that first fire escape conversation, to breaking our pact, to this moment where I was ready to open my life up in a way I hadn't before. With Noah, I was learning that love wasn't about perfect timing or flawless beginnings. It was messy, uncertain, and sometimes scary. But it was also real, and for the first time in a long time, that felt enough. The pact we'd made not to talk about what happened that night, it wasn't about silence anymore. It was about protecting something fragile until we were both ready to nurture it into something true. And now, I think we're ready. The night I finally introduced Noah to my closest friends felt like crossing a threshold I'd been cautious to approach for years. I was nervous, more than I expected, wondering if they'd see him the way I saw him, or if the quiet guy next door with the messy hair and the worn-out sneakers would fit into the small world I'd built around me. But the moment Noah walked into that cramped apartment, something shifted. He laughed easily at my best friend's terrible jokes, shared stories about the art gallery with genuine enthusiasm, and even joined a spontaneous dance-off in the living room. Watching him, I realized how much I'd underestimated that first spark we had on the fire escape. Later, when the crowd thinned and the noise settled, I caught Noah's eye across the room. Without a word, we found our way outside to the balcony, the city lights sprawling beneath us like a blanket of stars. Thank you, he said softly. For trusting me, I smiled, the familiar ache of vulnerability giving way to something warmer. It's not always easy, but it's worth it. We stood there in comfortable silence, the hum of the city beneath us reminding me how small and big everything could feel all at once. That night, I thought back to the pact we'd made, the one about not talking. At the time, it was our way of protecting ourselves from the unknown, from the fear that what we shared might unravel if examined too closely. But looking at Noah, I realized that some things aren't meant to be hidden away. They're meant to be lived. We never needed to label that night or dissect every moment. It was the quiet foundation beneath everything else, the truth we built on, and now, with the walls down and the silence replaced by shared laughter and honest conversations, it felt like the beginning of a real story. As Noah reached for my hand, his fingers warm and steady, I knew I had found more than a neighbor or a secret. I had found someone willing to face the messiness with me, someone who made the city a little less overwhelming and life a little more real. So yeah, we made a pact not to talk about what happened that night. But maybe, just maybe, that pact was never about keeping things hidden. Maybe it was about waiting until we were ready to let the silence speak for itself and let the story unfold on its own terms. And that felt more than enough.